My personal training certification is not updated, so it would just be as friends. I wouldn't be able to.
Any type of workout is working for me. Cool. Well, we're going to go and get started. It's 6:03. If you are just calling in, we're introducing ourselves in chat. Just add your name, where you're calling in from, and the last time you felt aligned as a person. This can be the activity you were doing or just how you felt in that moment. But it'd be great to get to know who's on the call this evening for Lance and I. But again, want to thank you all for coming to the second installment in our Firefly Summer Speaker Series. We're closing out the month of June with Lance. He is the founder of wellness and authenticity company Brave New Love, and we're going to be talking about reimagining his American dream this evening. Before we get started, I've already had some of you using chat. We're going to use chat a lot tonight. We want you to participate in chat. As with most things in life, you get out what you put in. So as Lance is sharing, if you have an insight, if you have a question, if something that he said resonates with you, if you had a similar experience, just pop that into chat. It's helpful for us. It's helpful for the rest of the group. And I think it makes it a more meaningful experience for us overall. I went ahead and disabled the raise hand feature. So you can't use it, but even if you did, I wouldn't know how to help you. So just use chat. I just mentioned the series. We're 1 month into our 4-month Firefly Summer Speaker Series. We have the schedule and more information about our upcoming speakers on outpasstrekking.co, so feel free to check that out if you are interested in attending more. But just a little bit about what the heck Outpass Trekking is anyway. My business, like many others, Lance's included, has been affected by the global pandemic, and rather than being sad about not being able to host in-person backcountry retreats this summer, I pivoted to host a speaker series with other entrepreneurs that I admire. But when we're not in the middle of a global pandemic, Outpass Trekking runs 4- and 7-day backcountry hiking and camping retreats. We also do 1-day intensives, one-on-one in Austin or on the road in locations where we're hosting trips. And really the purpose of these excursions is to shed the weight of the everyday, of technology, and just give growth seekers a chance to focus on themselves and get back to nature, which is a really powerful place for our brains, to build connections, to figure out what's next, to just decompress from our everyday life. And that's what these excursions are about. If you have hit a roadblock in chasing your goals, if you feel like you need a new goal to chase, we are bringing together really powerful growth seekers who are aiming to make those connections and to dive deep themselves. So that's a little bit about Outpass. I also wanted to thank everybody who bought tickets for this event. The event is totally free, so you went above and beyond if you spent some money for your ticket. And this figure is actually out of date because we had several ticket sales in the last hour, and so actually over $200 raised for the Marsha P. Johnson Institute at this point, which is amazing. Something that's been really special about this series for me is that the speakers get to pick the nonprofit that these ticket sales support. So thank you, Lance, for picking the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. They work to support Black transgender artists and communities seeking to end violence and racial injustice against Black transgender people. So I'm really excited to be making a donation to them after this event tonight. So cool. That's a little bit about what Outpass Trekking is. Thanks so much for your donations. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share and bring it back to Lance and I for the remainder of this chat. Lance, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate you taking some time out to share your story with us and to share your insights. Really excited to learn from you this evening. Anything you want to say as we kind of kick this off?
I just want to say, thank you so much for having me. I guess full disclosure for everyone, Sarah and I have a history of working together that I've been sharing on social media and whatnot. So we've got a close relationship, as does many people that have joined. So honestly, it's just so great to see everyone. So thank y'all for joining, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. And if you're just now joining us, we've had a few people pop in the last few minutes. Go ahead and introduce yourself in chat, your name, where you're calling in from, and the last time you felt aligned as a person. That can be the activity you're doing or how you felt in that moment. And actually, my first question for you, Lance, is actually really a question for the group. Would love responses to this in chat as well from everyone. But Lance, if you knew you could not fail, absolutely knew 100% you could not fail, what would your next goal be?
Mm. Um, my next goal would be probably very centered around what the Brave New Love like mission or dedication is, which is basically to share stories and create space to live authentically. It's a really simple statement, but the more that I have learned about authenticity in general, and then also just the communities and the worlds around us through listening to other people's stories, I realize how aspirational the goal is. So if I like couldn't fail, that's what I would be going for.
Does that scare you a little bit, just like saying it out loud in a group?
Yeah.
That's how you
It
know
does.
yeah, that's how you know it's like your next impossible goal, I feel like,
Yeah.
if you're scared.
Yeah.
If you have an impossible goal coming to mind for you, just pop that in the chat. We would love to know what's really landing. But
Yeah.
Lance, I feel like some of, even the simplest goals can be some of the most powerful ones, especially when you think about how much work we have to do as a society fixing systemic racism and many other things that plague not only just Americans, but people around the world. I want you to kind of take me back to January of 2020, pre-pandemic. You are an entrepreneur, you're just getting started building the business of your dreams. Like, where are you in this moment? How are you feeling? What are you doing? Like, what does 2020 mean to you before all of this has happened?
Right. So in general, it's hard for me to do this type of exercise. It's really hard for me to zoom out from my like current experience. Luckily I write, so I can go back and kind of like read how I was thinking and what I was doing. But January of 2020, I was so excited to be lifting Brave New Love off the ground in terms of building out my mobile massage practice. It had been such a journey to get to the point where I was kind of leaving what I had defined as success for myself in terms of the career path that I was leading, to take this big leap into wellness entrepreneurship, and basically go to massage school. I had been doing not a massage, but wellness activities on the side since college on as like my side hustle, my side passion. Anyway, so there was so much joy in January. I had events lined up. Actually, Chloe is someone that with the events that she works, I was in talks with to basically be showing up to do massage at endurance events, whether it be bike rides or triathlons, all that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, just building out my base. I was really digging deep into that process. Anyway, so that was the mindset.
It sounds like you were in a really wonderful and positive place after getting Brave New Love off the ground.
Yeah, I definitely was. I was loving it so much. Like it was exciting to get to be and challenge. Don't get me wrong, it was challenging as well. Just to do all of the aspects of your business and definitely when I was in the massage school aspect of it and kind of just common advice in general, the idea of starting fresh right after graduation, jumping into kind of the market directly without going to either a spa or clinic beforehand wasn't necessarily like advised against, but it was just advised to do that with caution. And so I was really taking a big leap to just jump straight from school with the clients that I had more or less taken on. And then, like I said, just trying to like gradually build. So 2020 was at that time, like I didn't even see an issue for me in terms of what was going to happen. I was definitely excited for sure.
Yeah. And this next question is maybe putting a little bit of the cart before the horse, but you just mentioned at that time, and I'm curious, like, it seems like a really positive time in your life, but so much has happened since January. So much has changed in your business. I know since we've talked. Where do you think you were holding yourself back as an entrepreneur back in January?
That's a great question. So now that I have gone through a lot of, I would say like trial and stress, discomfort associated with much that we'll probably talk about, I have realized that I was definitely holding myself back in January. And maybe that's not the best way to phrase it, but I was doing that thing that I do where I was hyper focusing on the thing that was in front of me, which was the massage arm of Brave New Love. But when I did that initial jump into wellness entrepreneurship in general, everything that I had kind of mapped out in terms of my plans for what Brave New Love was going to be was more centered around this idea of authenticity and encouraging folks on their own authenticity journeys. I was basically doing that through massage, right, as the way to like make money. But I, again, was kind of hyper focused on that, still writing and doing some of the other activities, but I hadn't really leaned into what those looked like because I was so focused on the little hill or mountain, whatever you want to call it, that was in front of me.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about, like, massage was obviously a big part of your business at the beginning of the year. Where is it now, and what does your business look like today?
Yeah. So probably a good middle step there to get from where I was at the beginning of the year to now would be that journey of COVID in general. So to kind of put everyone in the mindset of at least where I was at with the business, and like I said, I know everyone has different stories here, and that's kind of, in my opinion, the power of sharing and having communication about where we are at in our lives authentically, without putting up a lot of the walls or masks that we sometimes do in kind of day-to-day conversation. So it was March 13th, Friday the 13th. I had just finished one of my last client, who's a good friend, and basically as I was picking up, and her partner was coming home, and more or less like the news of COVID, like that day, I mean, everyone knows how news works. It just went from it felt like it went from 0 to 60. Basically, when her partner came home, he was talking about it. I was kind of thinking, oh no, should I even be in this person's, like, in their house, like thinking through everything. And basically got to the point where I was just going to suspend services for a little while, with the idea that this would probably pass over within like a week or two. Fast forward a week later or so, it became illegal for massage to practice. It was no longer just a personal choice that I had made. And that's when things really changed. I immedely, or what I'm learning now in retrospect, after doing quite a bit of, I guess, like meditation and like personal work on the topic, is that I reverted back to a previous groove, a previous mindset that I have had in my life, which is to solve the problem that's at hand at all costs. And usually for me, at all costs means at the, I guess, potential negation of like my wellness overall, or kind of like what's best for me from either a physical or mental health perspective. So I immediately let the world know I was okay. I had another job where I was teaching ESL classes online, which you guys might see some of my fun decorations from. I still kept it. I still have it part of my day to day. Anyway, and so I dove into that full time. So basically, I wasn't even really thinking about being a massage therapist or anything. I was more or less shifting gears completely, and I did that to my detriment in terms of how much of my work that I was doing, and I was not processing what was happening. Basically, I was in the resilience trainings that I do, which I know some folks on the call have been a part of. I was acting in a disassociative manner. I was disassociating myself from the trauma or the issue that was at hand. And I wasn't just accepting the fact that I had more or less lost my job for the time being, and all of the mental things that come along with that, and in terms of really needing to sit with that discomfort. So it wasn't until like I said, the rubber hit the road on my front in terms of what I was doing until I hit a wall. Not to put like more like running or like racing like metaphors in here, but when I finally hit that wall, that's when I go, oh no, I need to reassess. And that's where I started this process now of kind of recreating or rethinking about what Brave New Love was. I had to pull back, had to disassociate or decenter my experience with what was happening. At first, I thought that, I mean, I have a very strong shadow voice, I think is the common term in psychology. I just call it shapeshifter Lance. The inside voice that says all the things that's not going to go right. Anyway, he was very strong about, you hadn't got your business to where it needed to be, you failed, you didn't have enough time. It was all very like me-centered and didn't have anything to do with the fact that none of us planned for COVID, like none of us asked for it. It impacted us all as a nation, like in various levels and ways. So I had to decenter that notion. And then when I finally was able to zoom out enough, it's like an idea of, like I said, basically creating a little bit of situational awareness with what was going on. Then I could approach the problem at hand, which was, what is Brave New Love if we're not going to do massage anymore, or if I'm not going to do massage anymore? I was already writing at that time. I had a community that I'm still working on and building. And the entire messaging on that front was, like I said, creating space or sharing stories and creating space for folks to live authentically. And none of that was specific to massage. So I shifted focus, and after realizing that me sitting in my room or my office here and trying to think on how to figure out what was next wasn't really working, basically isolating myself, which I'm sure many folks on the call understand that feeling with how COVID has just changed, like the number of interactions that we have with people, especially for those of us that are lifted up by those interactions. I started reaching out. So I started to basically want to have connections, started to have calls with people one-on-one, and video calls, group calls with friends, with the intention of hearing from them certain one of which was their story. Then the next piece was basically hearing more about their thoughts on authenticity and what that looked like for them. And it's been great. So now the business has shifted very much in terms of what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about doing. The idea now is to hold space for folks in the same way that I've been doing on these calls, and basically do some authenticity listening first. That's like step one, and then authenticity encouragement on their own wellness journeys. And while I can't manipulate their bodies, and work with their muscles and everything like that, that concept that massage therapists take so seriously, or something that I learned in massage school, of holding space and what that looks like, really spoke to me and really resonated. Because for me, what that kind of meant was obviously working on someone and offering a massage and the service. But the other piece was just letting everything go when you're with that person, right? I don't know how many folks have received massage work or are familiar with body work in general, but if you have a good therapist, in my mind, that therapist is going to prioritize you and your needs over the course of the time with them. It is a perfect example, both physically and then also in a way, mentally, emotionally, where folks can let so much of their guards down, right? There's various levels of, folks in terms of dress. Some people go all the way in terms of just being nude for the massage, because that can allow for a lot more, benefits from the massage perspective in terms of like access and what we can work on. So just that idea alone of being like nude with a therapist in the room is interesting, right? And that'd become my norm with people. And then if that's the first step, and then you get to the point where there's not a lot of the, oh, everything's great. When someone asks, how are things? They start to tell you a little bit more. And as a massage therapist, I'm by no means a mental health expert. That would be something that would be for someone else. But just the idea of meeting that person and listening can be very powerful. And I'm basically realizing that even in this time of COVID, even though we can go and get massage, that is now legal and available. I can't do it for reasons that we'll probably talk about. But even in this time, that idea of holding space, even virtually, I think is impactful, or it has been with the folks that I've been having conversations with.
Yeah, definitely. Right when you were starting to share a little bit about your process, you mentioned something that I think entrepreneurs and like even people with an entrepreneurial spirit who don't own their business feel and deal with every day, which is that we try to solve the problem at all costs. We are, head on, let's figure it out. And it can be hard to stop and reflect. And you talked through like all of these wonderful ways you've pivoted your business and kept like the line of authenticity and resilience sort of there, even if it wasn't through massage work. But I'm curious, like, how did you get over that first hump? Like, what are some strategies that you use to slow yourself down and say, okay, it's not about solving this problem right now, it's about taking steps.
Yeah. That is going, for me, that has to do with a lot of sitting with discomfort. And that's something that I was speaking to pretty regularly when I was sharing about this talk. My initial response to discomfort, it's like when you're at a doctor's office and they basically do the test to see your reflexes with your knee. Like, my initial response is to get rid of it and try to not have that in my life. And I think that that's a pretty normal conditioning for a lot of us, for better or worse. That's kind of an Americanism that we have, is to just smile, carry on, pull yourself through it. And obviously that doesn't always work. So my process was sitting with that discomfort. I took many a personal health day. I know that it looks different when you're working for yourself versus when you're working at a job, but I allowed my space for that. I basically had to stop the mind or the little shapeshifter person in my brain telling me what I should be doing and what basically needs to be happening, and more centered on what was going on for me. And then in terms of takeaways or real practical applications, what that looks like for me would be a mix of physical activity. I need to move, I need to run, and then I need to slow, just for reasons of my life in general. Basically growing up in a very conservative environment and a very faith-based environment, I've learned, basically been diagnosed with PTSD from that experience, and rather than kind of push that down, now that I've been exploring it more, I'm basically learning that I'm in regularly in a constant state of clinch, and basically the idea of sitting with discomfort creates more clenching. And so the way for me to unclench is a mixture of movement massage, or not movement massage, movement meditation, which massage actually can be. I think there might be some various understandings of what meditation can actually look like, but for me, I need to have something going on with my hands or walking or whatnot when I'm doing that meditation work. So that's one piece, in addition just to the fitness aspect. And then the final one for me is journaling and writing. I write a ton and I put it out there, but I write a lot that doesn't go anywhere. It's just for my own personal work.
If somebody's just trying to get started with journaling as a way to sort of slow down, what are some prompts, or what do you say to somebody who's I don't journal, but I'd really like to?
Yeah, like me, basically. What would I say to me? Like before I started journaling regularly. Yeah, exactly. Like I remember trying to start that process when I was little, like multiple times, and like writing for like 3 days, and then thinking that I failed. So that's where I would start. I would say that there's no right way to journal, and there's no right way, honestly, to do a lot of self-help or wellness activities in regards to living authentically. Broadly, there's no way to like live authentically wrong incorrectly, which was a tough thing for me to learn. But the idea of meeting whatever you have to give at that moment and just realistically reinforcing to yourself that that is okay and that is good. It sounds simple, it sounds really easy, but for someone like me, that's very tough. And so basically just start and don't try to put goals towards it, or like that. That's basically my recommendation in general. One thing that I'm finding with conversations that I've been having with folks about authenticity is that we very regularly apply like business structured goals to our personal wellness and our lives. And I don't necessarily think that that's always a good idea. Just because obviously in the corporate world or in a business, I mean, as an entrepreneur, just in general, you want to set metrics and guide marks to help you get to somewhere, basically put you outside your comfort zone and whatnot. But with the idea of journaling or anything, meditation, to kind of unclench or to sit with discomfort, the idea isn't to hit the next milestone. In a way, the idea is to basically relax. It's actually shifting from, for like science folks out there, it's shifting from your sympathetic nervous system to your parasympathetic nervous system, which I wish was a switch that we could turn on and off. But it's not. So the idea of just starting writing about whatever it is on your mind, don't care if it's good or not, and just going, is my piece of advice. Just do it.
Yeah, and that's so hard for entrepreneurs to do, I think, because we're goal-oriented people, and a lot of people get to where they are today because they are constantly pushing themselves to achieve that next thing. But you're basically saying for an entrepreneur to have the space, they need to be really creative and really pivot the business, especially in a moment like today. It's important to be goalless and to reflect in that space and not have anything tied to it. So I really love that.
Yeah. The goal is to have no goal.
So there is a goal. We're going to get around it somehow. I know Laura popped a question in the chat.
Nice.
About writing prompts that you had that helped you redefine your success, or where success could be more calibrated to being more aligned with yourself. Were there any prompts that you used to help you with that, or are you somebody who just kind of writes?
I'm more of just a write of whatever is kind of going on in my mind. So I don't have the specific prompt outside of whatever it is that I am feeling more of. For some context, I'm learning that I'm a highly sensitive person or an empath, and so I feel real hard, and I have really tried to keep that at the minimum for a majority of my life and kind of repress that. In addition to many of the things that I repressed about my identity, my sexuality, my gender expression, as a gay, closeted, trying to be heteronormative person. So my writing prompts are literally just the emotions that I'm feeling at any given time. So basically, if I'm feeling despair, I write about that despair. If I'm feeling joy, I am actually trying to make a more concerted effort to use more of the happy emotions, because for a long time I was only hitting the negative emotions. I was like, oh, I need to write this out. But using more of the happy emotions to guide some of the writing as well is kind of the way that I go about it. But then maybe another answer along the same lines to this type of question in terms of redefining success would be what I was indirectly thinking in terms of my metrics for what I was doing with my business. So something as simple as like, how many likes am I getting on my Instagram posts, or like how many like follows do I have? For someone like me, that was not at all a good measurement of what I was trying to do with Brave New Love, right? In terms of like impacting people on a real and like person-to-person basis. And so that's an example of me having to unlearn or remember basically that some of the business school things that I'd been taught were not going to serve me in what I was doing. And so that was something that I had to relearn and think about, if I'm wanting to, basically encourage folks to live authentically, is that really happening in a post? It might. But for me, it's more impactful when I get someone to reach out to me afterwards. And, I had a handful of posts that I felt like did really good and I got a lot of likes or whatever, but I might put one or two posts up that were really personal and get someone send me a DM that turns into a conversation. And for me, that's what I started to kind of think of as my new like metric for success.
Yeah, setting metrics that you actually care about. And sometimes that's not the likes or the comments on social, for sure.
Right. Instead of what society tells me to think about.
I want to turn to, you made brief mention of this earlier, the fact that you've been diagnosed with the PTSD related to your upbringing and some of the things that you've experienced, but it also sounds like you've really challenged something that can be, and I'm sure was, extremely difficult for you over, many years of your life. How did you move past that, and how have you leveraged it to be an asset or a strength as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Open up
What a question. So to put it into context for the group, for folks that are familiar with that part of my story, it was a process, basically. So I grew up in an evangelical, like Christian fundamentalist, like culture and world. I love many members of my family. I love my community even. Like I still have like strong feelings towards my hometown. But basically my worldview was very, very different than it was, or than it is now, right? Not just in relation to kind of how I viewed myself. At the time, I internalized this idea that I was an abomination, or that I was like very, very much less than. But it also impacted how I viewed others, how I viewed, certain ideas, and like I said, certain Americanisms. I watched a documentary recently where they described Texas as like America or Americanism on steroids, and I resonate with that, coming from like a rural area. That basically it permeates culture, kind of. It's really hard to see where religion stops and where the community starts. Anyway, so I, as a result of that experience, learned to do a lot of kind of repression of kind of who I was, and kind of modulating of my personality and how I presented myself to the world. And that was for the negative, to the detriment of kind of my well-being overall. And it wasn't until I left the church and had to completely do a 180 in terms of like my worldview through an organization called Texas 4000 that many folks on this call were a part of. That was actually a huge part of my process. But more or less, I came out and thought that everything was going to be fine. And the answer that I'm constantly learning is that nothing in terms of kind of mental health or an authenticity journey is a box that can just be checked and goes, okay, great, now I'm like living authentically. But what I've also had to learn now is that for where I was at and what was happening in my brain and around me, I was doing my best in terms of living authentically. So this is a long walk to basically say that I picked up a lot of really, really good skills that I think many members of the LGBT community can relate to in terms of being able to modulate the type of person that I was and the type of individual that I was putting forth in different scenarios to meet someone where they were at. Because the initial or the reason or the goal for all of that was to make sure that I never drew attention to my sexuality, even though like anyone that knew a gay person knew that I was gay. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying that I was like fooling anybody, but like for me, for the idea, it was to basically come off as likable. And I think that that skill set has been very valuable for me. And basically the work that I'm doing now is to kind of come to terms with that individual that I was putting forth to the world. Specifically at Texas 4000 and even in the years after when I was that was based off of all of these signals that I had been receiving about how to gain value or worth in society, right? Like, oh, people liked it when I was successful at track and field. Okay, I'm gonna lean into that. People really liked it, or they give me validation. They tell me that I'm doing good things when I made good grades. Awesome, I'll be valedictorian. Cool. And then I go to college and people seem to like it when you are engaged and like in extracurricular activities. Awesome. I'll figure out something that's super cool and it's just like a mic drop. I'll ride my bike to Alaska. Awesome. Like all of these things I had, if you would have asked me in the moments what my reasoning was, I would have probably given you other answers. But again, it was all kind of based on being able to be everyone's likable to everybody. And again, so basically now my work is coming to terms with that and not just doing away with everything that I accomplished during that time when I more or less like don't really feel like I was fully allowing myself to be the queer individual that I am, and to use some of those strengths. I used it with you and some of the other folks on the call at Texas 4000. A lot of the coaching that I was giving folks from a leadership perspective was how to be the leader to every single person in the room. Mm-hmm. That was not something that, I mean, I wasn't like reading a ton of leadership books or anything at the time. I was pulling off of my experience of working with many different types of people and always trying to come off into their good graces. So that's one example of a way that I've used that experience that was very negative and has needed a lot of therapy and a lot of personal work to kind of get through to now try to infuse into what I'm doing and to bring it full circle into what I'm doing right now in terms of authenticity encouragement is that I am meeting the people that I work with or the people that I have conversations with where they're at. And that can be pretty tough. In the creative like model that I'm working on right now, kind of creative framework of how to think about authenticity, one, based off of my own experiences, but two, based off of all these calls that I'm having and all these conversations with folks and their stories as well. The idea of meeting someone where they're at, I think involves a level of empathy that is hard to achieve, that's hard to flex. And so as an example of me having a conversation, say, with someone who doesn't necessarily respect my rights as a like queer American, that I should have like equal or same rights, or they don't really understand it. That is an example of me having to meet them where they're at, find some empathy for their worldview and kind of why they got to that point, and have a careful, gentle, understanding conversation rather than be too focused on what's going on for me at the moment. So that's kind of an example of how I turned that frown upside down.
Oh my God, what a great use of that phrase. I think what you're talking about is like super relevant to what many people in society are doing right now in engaging in conversations about racism. And I think meeting people where they're at is something that's been really challenging for people. Like you know, for somebody who's like walking into a conversation with their friend or a family member, or maybe they're a white person like I am trying to engage their Black community, like what's one thing that you can do, maybe the sort of the best thing that you can do to kind of open up that space and meet somebody where they're at?
Yeah, that's a tough one for sure.
That's why I'm asking the questions.
That's something that we'd tackle. It's very dependent on the situation, right? And I think I should just clarify the statement by saying that, like, my experience as a queer person and dealing with oppression is different than all the other types of oppressions that folks can face based off their identities. So the reason why I call that out is that I think it's just important to have an intersectional approach. You know, everyone kind of understand that and know that we're not comparing like experiences by any means. But when I think about it from my perspective and my conversations with folks, like specifically regarding my experience, is one, to not engage if you're in a argumentative or kind of like a quote unquote like debate scenario where there seems to be going to be a winner. Like, we're not going to win. Like, like that's not what we're talking about here in regards to this type of conversation. So really kind of gauging that out with the individual and seeing if they have the ability to be open. This is different than if you're just having a if you're making a one-off comment, maybe something that was said that was inappropriate, you just want to like let that go. This is more of having a heart-to-heart as to why, you know, as me, as an individual who has recently learned quite a bit in terms of like my shortcomings in this area and my like perpetuation of like racist ideas and racist like thoughts that I was having, like, sorry, it basically has to get to the point where you know that the person is willing to meet you where you are and going to be open. So the model or like the idea there is to, one, is the person even aware of racism, or are they aware that there's a problem? If they're not, then that's where you start. And basically just having a theoretical discussion on that front. Again, if you think that they're open to hearing your idea. If they're already there and they're like, yes, racism is a problem. Or, you know, we can also apply this to you could apply the model to just your personal like career experience and things like this too. But if they're at the idea where they have an accepted of like, okay, this is a problem, then kind of exploring that next step of actually starting to listen and hear voices that aren't yours, right? If it's me having a conversation with one of my like friends or family or loved ones who are also white, I don't have that part of the conversation. I basically clue them in that it's now time to go listen to some other voices and to some other educators on that front. And then when they get back, we can talk about how that experience went, you know, maybe hopefully through listening to other people's stories. And this is something that Brave New Love is very adamant about, is that through that process of listening to someone in the first person tell their experience, that you can create more heartstrings, or basically more connection points of your own experiences with theirs. And that can be the thing that can really pull someone together and get them to the point where they realize, oh, I'm empathizing with this person now. I don't want to experience that anymore. Well, everyone that was involved with Texas 4000 on this call saw that firsthand. For the folks that aren't familiar with this group, it's a nonprofit. Actually, Ross is a staff member there now. They ride their bikes to Alaska every summer. Right now they're doing a virtual ride because of COVID. So just another example of how this global pandemic has impacted us. But leading up to that, that departure to this awesome bike ride that's so much fun, on a weekly basis, folks share a little bit about their story of why they joined, and they do it in first person. And these folks are coming with, again, different experiences, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different races, different religions, and they're listening. Mm-hmm. And it's just something that over the course of the 4 years that I was there, I wasn't even really understanding it too much when I was there. I mean, as Sarah, one constant thing was whether or not we let these conversations go too long or too short or anything like that. I was like, should we cut these? I wasn't even clued into how powerful they were. But as we continue to try to make the teams more diverse through just a variety of tactics on our end, and I mean, we were picking someone that had a very conservative, like small town, like I would say like a me background. And then we were picking people that are, like queer and happy and like putting that forth in the world, and all of these different individuals, putting them together on a team. And we really had issues we had issues, but we didn't have issues on the idea of seeing each other as teammates and caring about each other's experience. And that to me really speaks volumes in terms of like what the power of storytelling can do.
Yeah, and the power of like listening to someone else's experiences as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's strong.
It is strong. Lance, we are almost out of time. This has been the most insightful conversation for sure I've had all day, definitely all month. I'm just curious, maybe one final word from you. Maybe there's somebody on this call now, or there's somebody who's going to watch the recording later who's feeling like they are consistently living their lives inauthentically, unaligned to who they are, what they want to be doing, and they're not quite ready to pursue that big goal. Maybe they don't even know what it is. What do you say to that person?
Okay. I would say to that person that first off, wherever you're at right now is authentically what you need to be doing. What we can work on next is taking the awareness that this person is experiencing, right, with that discomfort, and realizing that they want to make some type of change, and we can take that to the next step. Know that it's not going to be, again, an easy checklist, an action guide of 5 steps to success and happiness. Know that it's going to be a process, but know that if you give yourself the patience and basically the grace or the care that you would probably give to someone else that's in your life that you love, you will progress on that path. So that's what I would say, that it's not just something that we can check off by any means, but it's definitely something that's attainable, and then we can work on it together.
Yeah, I love that. And you can tell that you've definitely gone through that experience yourself. Lance, I want to thank you so much for spending so much time with us today and sharing your insights. Brave New Love has a lot of stuff going on right now. You've made a big pivot in your business since the start of the year, but you mentioned these authenticity listening and coaching sessions that you have available. You have some workshops coming up. You have a newsletter. You're on social. I mean, tell us a little bit about what you've got coming up this summer.
Yes. So like I'd mentioned, the conversations that I was having with friends and family, they've also organically started with folks through my writing and the socials. Basically, when I would share more or less like a big like essay or big item that was deep, they would reach out and we'd have a conversation. So we're continuing that. The authenticity listening sessions are like 30 minutes to an hour, and that will be my first thing that I would love. Anyone that's on this call, like, you've listened to me for an hour, I want to listen to you now for an hour and basically learn from you. Those are currently right now, it's a free service, and I want to continue to do that. The coaching sessions would be if we have identified something that you want to work on together, whether it be, like I said, dealing with discomfort or unlearning. Those are 2 areas that we can work on right now from an interpersonal perspective. or kind of where we got out in terms of wanting to get to the point where you're creating space for other people, we can talk through how the authenticity model applies to that as well. So all that's on the website. And then the workshops, are guided discussions with other people. In my experience with doing trainings at Texas 4000 that we spoke to, managing folks in corporate, and then even now when I've been doing little trainings online with ESL students, it has always been an interesting dynamic to work with other people together. And so the first one, authenticity and personal wellness, that's going to be applying the model to yourself, or the framework to your own authenticity journey. And then situational leadership and creating space will be that idea of doing that broadly with other people. And then if none of that resonates, would love for you to have to join the newsletter. I've got a little bit coming up in terms of a podcast where we will be sharing stories. So if this is something that you love, or if you'd like to be involved with sharing your story, that would be a great way to get involved. So all those things.
I love it. Thank you so much. Yeah, Lance, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Thank you everybody for coming. This wraps up our event this evening, and Lance, thank you again for everything you shared this evening.
Absolutely. Thank y'all so much for attending. It was so good to see everybody's faces. I hope you have a good rest of the night.
Thank you.